could look more like a witch today if I tried. Hello, welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and I'm here with my August wrap-up because it is not too late. August kind of flew by, didn't it? If you can hear anything, that's my wife in the kitchen. I read, I think, 22 books in August. My TBR was 20, so I definitely hit that, but I feel like I missed off some, and I can't be bothered to go back and check, so you can go back and check for me, watch my August TBR and see if I missed any off. I did read some bonus books this month. I read a few things I wasn't planning on reading, I read some library books. It was a pretty good month. And yeah, I'm going to try and give you a bit of insight into what I read this month, what I liked, what I didn't like, and I'll try not to make this video go on for too long because nobody wants that. I started off the month on a high. I read Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan, which I feel like I've talked about until the cows come home. It's been in pretty much every single video I've done this month, so I won't talk too much about that. It's set in the same universe as the Natural History of Dragons books, which if I remember, I will put the cover up on the screen so you can remember those. It's absolutely amazing. It talks about the ethics of archaeology, translating ancient languages, the ethics of artifact collecting in Victorian times. P.S. there were none. And it's just such a great book. It basically was written with me in mind. I can't think of a better book for myself. I wholeheartedly recommend this. I think I gave this 5 stars. I'm not going to remember all of the star ratings I gave these books. I'm going to give an approximation if I can remember if they're 5-star or if they were particularly terrible. The next book I read was the first Animorphs book, which I'm not going to go into too much detail about because you can just watch my video where I talk about it. Doesn't that look exceptional? Go and do that. That's a great idea. Next up, I read Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. This is a YA fantasy book where the main character is a tailor, so it's a cool twist on the young woman ends up in palace, has to do thing. It's usually fighting or something similar or seducing. In this case, she's a tailor. I thought this was really cool. I've really got into sewing lately. I sewed my own costume for an event we went to recently, so this was kind of well timed for that. There was some criticism from people with disabilities when this came out, saying that the disability representation wasn't that good, and obviously as an able-bodied person I can't comment on that with any kind of authority. I will say it has changed since that original plotline. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but the big problem that they had with it was something to do with the end that I can't spoil, but it's quote-unquote fixed, for want of a better word. My problem with that mainly was that I feel like the story would have been exactly the same if you didn't have that bad representation of disability. You could have lifted that out and it would have been fine. But yes, other than that, I really enjoyed this. It was a really good, refreshing book. As you'll see from this list, I had a bit of a fluffy time with YA this month, and I'm not really sure whether that's me moving on from the genre a little bit or needing a bit of a break from it, because I've had some real wins this month as well. I don't know what to tell you. Next up, it was my reread of Scythe by Neil Schusterman. I talked about this a bit in a vlog, but what was really interesting about this is that I won't say I disliked this the first time I read it. I wasn't a big fan of this the first time I read it, and then I read the second one and I absolutely adored the second one. And with the balance of Thunderhead and Scythe together, and knowing what happens in Thunderhead and knowing what the focus of Thunderhead is, I actually like this a lot more. The romance between the two characters that was so bloomin' annoying the first time I read this, didn't find it annoying this time because I know that in the second book it's not as bad. The benefits of rereading. The next thing I read on the day I purchased it, and that's Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel. This is the novelisation of her webcomic that she posts online at Tapas, I think. And also you can be a patron of hers on Patreon, and you can get it a little bit early. So you can read all of this for free, but I purchased it because I love these books. I love lending them out to people. It's really nice, happy, queer romance. And I'm just, I know people overuse the term I'm trash for this, but I am trash for this, and it's really good. Next up, I read the second and third Animorphs book, which again, I'm not going to talk in too much detail about because you can watch the videos. They'll be up here. I'll put the playlist up and you can watch everything I've got up to by the time this video goes up. Next, I read Kingdom of Souls, which was a bit of a miss for me. It was partly a problem of overhype, I think, and partly an issue of I'm in such a YA slump. As I say, I just found this book a bit kind of overly confusing. I didn't really care about many of the characters, except the kind of protagonist, but her I wasn't even that invested in. And also it felt like nothing happened, or nothing was decided by the main character. It was all sort of happening to her for at least the first 100 pages, and it's a 300-page or so book. I've lent it out to someone, and I'm hoping it'll be one of those things where eventually I'll read it again and see it with new eyes, and it'll just be that first reading that I didn't quite get my head around things. And I think if you're in a good place with YA at the moment, it's probably a very good read. It just wasn't one for me. Next I read Tomorrow When the War Began, which I borrowed from a friend. I can't remember who wrote it. Maybe I'll put their name on the screen. I didn't like this very much. It was one of those annoying things where the characters in the book don't know what's going on, so you as a reader don't get to know what's going on, and I'm in a place right now where I have enough not knowing what's going on in the world and Parliament, and I just really wanted to know what was happening. And it's a series, and also that's kind of the point, but not for me. Not for me at this moment in time. Next, I finished Nevernight, both in audio and physical form. I kind of split between the two. Loved this. Love this, love this, love this. I've just finished Darkdawn, and now I kind of want to go back and read this from the start all over again so that I can experience the series anew. I'm really glad that I reread Nevernight, and at the beginning of September I reread Godsgrave. I think I got a lot more out of Darkdawn having reread both of them. Next I read Wild Savage Stars by Christina Perez, which is the sequel to Sweet Black Waves, which I thought I had somewhere but possibly have got rid of. Oh no, it's right there. I didn't like this either. It's really unfortunate. I just had a series of books where I just felt really friggin' confused. I couldn't remember what was happening. I didn't like the setting. I didn't like the power balance that was in play. And one of my kind of pet peeves in books, well, not pet peeves, one of my things I don't like reading about in books is where they get into like, but the woman is not a virgin anymore, because virginity is such a stupid concept. So it didn't hit the right marks for me, I suppose. I said in my review on my blog, which you can follow, go below, I think it's one I might reread, maybe. If I'm ever in a place where I'm on top of my TBR, if they just say we're going to stop publishing books for a couple of months and let me catch up, then maybe I'll reread it. Oh, then I had another bit of a fail, which is so depressing. It was kind of a series. I was having a really rubbish week. Then I read Brightfall, which I'll put up on the screen. That was on NetGalley, and I didn't like that either. I'm really disappointed. Again, I said in my review, when I think Robin Hood, I kind of think like swinging down from the trees and buckling his swash, but on land, and this was just sort of like floppy and wet. And I have friends who really love this. And some of it's just I really don't like reading about the Fae, and some of it's that it didn't hit me right. And maybe if somebody explained to me what they loved about it, I would feel a bit differently. Oh, the natural light is going. Sorry about this. But you know, what can you do? Then there was another bit of a fail. I read the sequel to Everless, which is Evermore. I don't rate the sequel at all. It was just pants and boring and pointless. It was about pointless as a damp sock. I just did not care about any of this or any of the characters. Maybe if you loved Everless, you would like Evermore because you'd be invested in the characters, but I just couldn't care less. Don't think it was worth my time reading. Glad I got it from the library, glad I did not purchase it. So then I needed a win. I was desperately in need of a win, so I'm really glad that my next read was And I Darken, which is by Kirsten White. It's the first book of the Conqueror saga. The second one is on my TBR for September. I absolutely adore this book. Gender flip Vlad the Impaler. I mean, what more do I need to say? But it's just so good and stabby and murdery. And basically all the books that I've read this month that have been stabby and murdery have been great. And all the ones that haven't been, I've been like, I don't care, give me more murder. So maybe I've just been having a month. Then I read The Lost Princess, which I talked about in my TBR. It was a bit gayer than previous books. I don't think it's earned the gay zoom. I don't think it has. Tolerable. I think it was a bit problematic that it kind of reduced Japan, the place, to like 3 or 4 elements, and it was just like, well, I'm in Japan now because that's the setting. It felt a little bit not that well handled, but maybe that's just me. Next up, I had a bit of a kind of thrown in at the last minute bonus read, which was The Black Tides of Heaven, which is an Own Voices Asian genderqueer fantasy. So in this world, everyone is gender neutral until a point where they declare their gender, and that's kind of their coming of age moment. And so it's a story about 2 twins kind of growing up in that world, and it was a really quite slow burn for a very small book. You know, it's not a lot of action, it was a bit more conceptual than that, and there were some moments that I thought were really lovely. I rushed through this, not in a not thinking about it way, but I just on a bus I was like, yes, going through this. It was really, really good. I might look up the other books in the series. I'm not desperate to do so. I think the first book was kind of enough. But yeah, would recommend this if you're looking for some more queer fantasy from Own Voices authors. Next up is the audiobook of Children of Time. If I have not waxed lyrical about Children of Time to you yet, I am going to do so now. Imagine a book about giant sentient space spiders trying to figure out what it is to be sentient and to have culture outside of the influence of humanity, except for a little bit of maths. Except it's amazing, and I have so many feelings about it. I'm in the middle of the audiobook for Children of Ruin at the moment, and it's not as good, but it is still very good, and the audiobook narrator is wonderful. And if you have an Audible credit going, if you have another audiobook service that you enjoy, if you can request it at your library, just read this book. It's so good. Next, I read The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This was probably the biggest book on my TBR, I think, this month. I really liked this. I was a little bit disappointed. It was my own fault. I thought that there was going to be a big plot twist, and I'd kind of already mapped it out in my head. I think that my big plot twist was actually better than what happened in this book, and that's not me being obnoxious. And the ending of this book is very good. My way would have just been cooler. I mean, what can I say? However, this does end very well. It is very good, but if you're expecting something else to happen and something slightly less dramatic happens, you're like, oh, well, wasn't what I thought. And I don't want to spoil it, so I can't say what my ending was, in case you also have the same experience. But it was good. Next, I reread To Kill a Kingdom, which I feel like I shouldn't have to pitch to you beyond saying it's Little Mermaid, but she's not a mermaid, she's a siren, and she wants to murder the prince. It's so good, and Ali Christo is so lovely, and I have to read Into the Crooked Place, which is her next book. Into the Crooked Place? In the Crooked Place? I'm not sure. Her next book this month, so I'm really looking forward to that because I just remembered how good this book is. It's really, really good fun. It's YA fantasy romance, really, but it's got lots of cool other stuff going on in it, and I would really recommend it if you're looking for some good YA to read. Next, I was kind of finishing off the rereads on my TBR at this point. This Mortal Coil by Emily Suvada. These books are so good. If you read The Hunger Games and you're just like, nothing else is like this, these are like that. They have the same kind of, you could see yourself in that world, but you would definitely not want to feel that The Hunger Games have. It's a world where you can tweak your DNA, or kind of hack your DNA. DNA sort of, you code it like a coder would. And the main characters in this world where everything's being taken over by a virus that's spreading really dramatically, and she gets caught up in a big national conspiracy, and it's just so fast-paced and so wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to rereading the sequel, This Cruel Design, before the third book comes out, which title I don't remember. Next up of my rereads was Daughter of the Burning City by Amanda Foody. This got a little bit wrinkled in my bag / the bath, so we're not going to talk too much about that. This was really good. I remembered it being good. I think the first time I read it, possibly I was a little bit blinded by the circus setting and didn't critique some of the plot elements as much as I possibly should have. But it was still a really nice read, and it was really nostalgic because I read this right when I started blogging, really. And it's just a really nice story. It's kind of a murder mystery, mostly a fantasy found family kind of novel. There are bits of it that are really, really sad, and it kind of made me a bit bummed about how much I was disappointed by what they called Ace of Shades and King of Fools, because they just don't have that same kind of like slightly creepy energy that this book had. And that disappointed me a little bit. And last, and maybe least, no, Evermore was definitely least, last is Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is an Own Voices African-inspired fantasy, and I thought this was alright. I thought it was pretty good. I was a bit annoyed. Some very good friends pointed out before I read this that there are basically no women in this book. There are a couple, but they're very much there as sort of not even side characters, like round the corner characters, but there are some really, really lovely moments in this book. There's some really good kind of training montage moments, which I really, really like in fantasy, especially in adult fantasy, and there were some really good beats of the story that got hit, but I can't really forgive the lack of women, since that's such a known problem in fantasy, and I would hold any book to that standard. So it's frustrating. I'm hoping that that criticism will come through from reviewers and readers, and any further books in this series or by this author will kind of feed that in, because I think if you added that, they would be pretty good, especially if you like fighty fantasy. If you don't like fighty fantasy, don't read this, it's not worth your time. But if you do, I think these would be really good. Maybe wait and see until the next one comes out if the criticism is taken on board, because it's also a debut author. There's a learning curve here. And I'm more disappointed in editors for not saying there aren't that many women in here, do they have to all be men? There you have it. I'm going to stop now because I'm going to go and fill my face with pasta because it's the end of a long day, as you can see by the sun setting on my face. I had a really good month this month. I'm hoping that September will be equally good. It's the 10th of September now and I'm feeling a little bit behind, but that's fine. It's all good. It's all okay. If you like this video, if you want to join me in my reading journey, you can subscribe, you can like this video, you can share it, you can follow me on all of my socials. and I will see you in the next one.